Maria.
Mike.
Mi vida, mi amor.
Welcome.
Welcome to my show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I mean, it's also your show, since a lot of ideas was yours, and you helped me a lot with this to build it. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
First and foremost. Mm-hmm. And we are gonna do this one in English. So apologies in advance to everybody watching for my bad English.
Yeah, it's just good what you're talking about.
Thank you. But my priority was for you to feel comfortable in this conversation. So let's start.
Okay, let's go.
If you have to define yourself with a few sentences, who is Maria Dušička today?
Well, what I would say is it's very different to what it was, 10 years before, even 6 years before I met you. So now, first thing that comes to mind, obviously, I think for you as well, it's a mother. Since we have our beautiful little child and wife, still very much into fashion, still very much into style, still very much into, protecting and loving the people that I chose in my life, and still very much myself, because you know me by now, I can't really act, and when I do, it's a horrible acting. And so, I think just staying true to everything that I chose and I love and I made my own.
That's beautifully said. Well said. And with all this being said, who you were before you became Maria Dušička? Tell me more about your life before.
I traveled a lot. I worked a lot. So I worked since I was, 14, 15 years old. And I started working in my own country. And then I moved in 2004 to the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And,
That's 20 years. That's crazy.
That is a lot of years, yeah. So I moved to the Middle East when it was, to Dubai in particular. It was a village. There was one highway and one shopping center.
It's hard to imagine, as you know, Dubai now.
But, for me, it was the fairy tale of times because I fell in love with it. When I was a little kid, I watched a lot of Aladdin. Mm-hmm. It was my favorite cartoon. So for me, the idea of the Middle East was something magical and beautiful. And when I came there for the first time, I fell in love with the city. It was nothing like it is today. Mm-hmm. It was a small kind of little village with a lot of Arabic feel. You could still hear the call for prayers, and you had to dress modestly. Mm-hmm. It's nothing what it is today. Now it's like a casino or a Disneyland for grown-ups. Before it was a nice, modest little place where everyone knew everyone and reputation mattered. It was kind of welcoming and warm and quiet, like a big village.
Like opposite of what it is today.
Absolutely, yes. Now, it's totally different. And I've seen it grow, which was beautiful. I would go away for a couple of weeks and I would come back and there would be new roads. You wouldn't know where to go, basically. And so I've seen it all. I was growing up basically always extremely independent since I was very young. Mm-hmm. I started working, being financially independent by the age of 15. Mm-hmm. Never asked my parents, for any money. And, I was skipping a lot of school because I had a lot of work. Yeah. So traveled a lot. And the work ethic that came to me very early as well. You had to be on time, you had to show up, you had to be at your best game, and people were counting on you, expecting things of you. And when you're 15, 14 even, in that age, it's a lot. And also what was a lot is kind of rejection. Mm-hmm. Because in modeling, you get rejected. That's part of the job. And, for the 14, 15, 16-year-old mind, you immediately start searching for what is wrong with you. And you don't particularly realize that, you're just not what the client needs, what the client wants. You're not the type of look that they're going after. And you start questioning yourself. So, self-esteem goes absolutely down below the floor and the rest of it. So, yeah.
This is your first interview.
It is.
For the audience, for your following that you built in Czech Republic and Slovakia since we are together.
Yeah.
So I would like to take you even further back in your childhood, because we both was born in a USSR.
Yeah.
In a communist country, and of course you was even further east which means like even more.
I was the original USSR.
Yeah.
You were like the
It was just the border, yeah. But we still had it similar, but I know you had it worse. So tell me about, how do you remember your childhood in Ukraine?
Well, so I was born 5 years before the split of the USSR. And I vividly remember going into the stores and seeing empty shelves. So there was absolutely nothing. And even if you wanted to buy something, my parents were not paid. They both worked in factories. And they were not paid with money. They were paid with food coupons.
Stamps.
And I remember seeing them like it was yesterday. You know, I remember what it looked like. And I remember going with either one of my parents to the stores. And there was absolutely empty shelves. You know, very kind of mean and awkward people working in those stores as well. I remember queuing for bread and, you know, few people before you reach the end of the queue, they would tell you that there is no more bread left. And I remember the frustration. I remember my mom sewing me all the clothes that I was wearing in my entire childhood. It was what my mom made. And she was a great seamstress, you know, she could knit. And my great-grandfather had some rabbits and stuff, so she would just take the skins and make me coats and hats.
That's crazy.
You know, so that was my childhood. But at the same time, I remember it as very kind of, as every child, I suppose, very free, you know, and very warm at the same time. Because I spent lots of time in the village with my great-grandparents as well.
Yeah.
And I spent lots of time at the Black Sea, where my dad was from, so in Yalta, which is now Russian. But was Ukrainian when I was in Crimea when I was born. And it was quite happy, but at the same time very difficult for my parents as well. You know, it was quite hard.
What was maybe a little better, one of the few things, is that the sense of community in the villages, right? That wasn't it like one big family, or how you remember this?
I was too young to think about it that way, you know. So what I had was my family, and my family is not that big, you know.
Yeah.
So I was the only child until I was 19 years old. So usually I would be the only kid in the environment, you know, and I grew up around grown-ups.
Okay.
You know, so for me, I would create my own games and I would kind of keep myself busy because nobody was like kind of playing with you or looking after you, you know. It was a very different parenting mindset as well. You know, the kids were supposed to keep themselves busy. And I remember because we lived in sort of communal apartment for the first 4 or 5 years of my life. And I remember playing with potato peels, you know, under the communal table because there was no toys as well. I had one matryoshka, which is a wooden doll that you open, and there is few more, which our kid is playing with now,
The
Aria.
classic, yeah.
So she has my one, you know, and few stuffed toys, but that was it. There was no developmental games. There was nothing that even your parents wouldn't engage you in the way we try to engage our children now.
Yeah, it's very different from now.
So I wouldn't say there was a communal, but I felt like everyone was doing their best to their knowledge, I suppose. But if I look back at that, it wasn't good enough, you know, obviously in some areas, and some areas was, of course, great. So,
and later in teenage years, you made a really brave and bold move. You stepped definitely extremely out of your comfort zone and you chose to go to completely foreign country on your own. How does that feel like?
well, I see because my parents divorced when I was young. So I was 7 when they divorced, and my dad moved away to a different city. My mom had her own kind of relationship that she was establishing with a new person. And I was kind of let be to myself in a way, you know. I was working, so I was independent. And in a way, I didn't feel like I needed so much of kind of permission or approval since I was my own unit by that time, you know, of my life. And I had a friend of mine who was a photographer in my city. He moved to Dubai. He sent my portfolio to all the agencies. And I was even kind of against it. I said, originally, I remember that. I said, like, I'm not sure I want to do that. You know, I like my country and I like where I'm from and I'm happy here. I have enough work. But it was kind of a chat between two friends. He's like, why don't we try? I was like, fine, you know, let's try. And I got signed for a couple months. You know, I came and I told my mom. My mom asked me, why am I going to Saudi Arabia? Which nobody knew what Dubai was, you know. But then, of course, I had to take approval from my dad as well. Since they were divorced, I had to have both parents sign approval. And off I went.
Yeah.
And that was
That's why you chose Dubai, because as a model, you could choose Paris, Milano.
Yeah. I never was kind of after that, you know. I was always, I was happy with where I was, but opportunity presented itself.
Yeah.
And I decided to try. Worst case scenario, I would be back, you know, in Ukraine in 2 months, haven't lost or gained anything, you know, just an experience. And I came there, I knew about 2 words in English. It was like hello and goodbye. And that was that, you know.
That's crazy.
And I understood it because obviously in schools they taught you English, but it was nowhere enough, you know, a level that you could freely communicate. So I kind of understood something, but I could never say anything back.
Yeah.
And it took me, I was like, you know, so I was like super shy, super quiet. And it took me about, I would say 2 years, you know, to start speaking. And when I did, it was obviously a new world for me because I could suddenly communicate with people. It was fantastic. But took some time and, you know, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't that difficult. Because Dubai was fantastic, kind of.
It was open to this kind of people coming there. He was very beautiful in that age.
I was very beautiful, wasn't I? Yeah.
And you still is.
Thank you.
But take me more into these first days and weeks, because like that must felt ridiculous, like in a movie that you come to the country and your first jobs, your first apartment, your first car. Tell me more about this feeling in this first months.
I was 16, right? Yeah. I was almost 17, but still 16, and I didn't have my driving license. So I lived in the model apartment and I actually shared it with a girl from Czech Republic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she told me what Matko pool was. And I was like, what's he talking about? You know, so and model apartment shared between 3-4 girls. The girls were changing, of course. And I had an agency that there was only about 2 or 3 agencies back in the day in Dubai. And we had all the jobs. It was ridiculous. If I think about it now, you know, we had 2 jobs sometimes in the day. We would shoot in the morning in Dubai and drive to Abu Dhabi for a fashion show, you know, or our agent would drive us because, you know, we didn't really drive. And it was super busy. It was worrying, of course, because I would go in and, you know, I couldn't communicate. Lots of these people didn't even speak English as well. Like they spoke Arabic back in the day. You know, the road signs were only in Arabic. All the English were introduced later as, you know, as people started coming in. And it was nerve-wracking. Obviously, I was, you know, not confident enough and I was worried and scared at some points, you know. But I was also talking about community. You know, there was 10 or 15 girls from around the world that were doing all the jobs back in the day in Dubai. Wow. And these 10 or 15 girls, you know, they took me in, which was fantastic for me because I was the youngest. And we kind of stuck together. And that's when I felt like I was in the place where I was supposed to be, you know, because everyone was looking out for one another. There was no jealousy, competition, you know, everyone was great and worked as a real team because, you know, there wasn't even enough jobs sort of for competition because all the brands, that's when all the big international brands started coming in. So it was Dior and Chanel and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we did. That's the jobs that we did, as well as the local designers and the local kind of jewelry houses, etc.
So they took you in and you had this one agent back from Ukraine that helped you start?
I had an agent, yes, and that lasted for 2 months. I was exclusive with them. I stayed for 3 months, actually, we extended. And I fell in love with the city. You know, for me, it was uncomparable to where I came from.
Course.
You know, and at the same time, my family was moving to Germany. And I came to Germany from Dubai. I saw it. I got my passport because I was entitled for the passport. And, you know, I told my mom, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not the life for me. I don't see myself living here. I can't do it. I want to be back. You know, and we kind of agreed that she trusts me and I can go and I can do it, you know. So I came there. I was staying with friends for some time, but I rented my own apartment. You know, I got my visa. I started, my driving license process, the lessons. And I remember working until late or obviously going out, I was young.
Yeah.
So I was going out and I was in the clubs, and then I would wake up at 6 a.m. to do my driving test, in high heels, by the way, because I lived at high heels back in the day.
That's cool.
And so I would do that. Yeah. And it all sounds and feels right now like a surreal kind of experience, first of all, because it was 20 years ago. And it feels like entirely another life that I've lived, know. And second of all, because I have so many like beautiful and warm and, heartfelt memories. And I made my first real friends there with who and with whom I still friends. Anna, godmother of our daughter. And, I've lived so many experiences there, and I've done so much. And, I grew up there. I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up with that culture. And so I would say right now, if you ask me what is closer to you, the Arabic culture or the European, it would still be Arabic culture.
Really?
Absolutely. I kind of I was programmed to think the way they thought.
Yeah.
And to live the way they live, the values, the family, the boundaries as well. Just the way you kind of present yourself, the way you hold yourself in public and in person, and this is what... It was so close to me for all these years, so I keep it in my heart until today,
I feel that from you, because there's more kind of like elegance and honor in their culture. It's not that...
Yeah, that didn't come from Ukraine, absolutely.
Yeah. It's not that connected to just showing off or like being materialistic in the way that... it's for others. It was like...
nothing's wrong with that. Me and my opinion on beautiful things, on luxury things. I like that. It's a nice add-on, obviously, to your life. And that's also, don't forget, I worked for that for 20 years. I grew up around that. And we're talking about, wealth.
Yeah.
Not just, people that can't afford a bag but still go and buy it because it's beautiful. That I can't understand and comprehend pretty much. But, I grew up around that surrounding where it was natural.
But what I was trying to say is that in the West, we usually like do these things to look good in front of others.
Right.
But like, I feel that in the Middle East, it's more like that's who they really are.
Absolutely.
Like they don't have to pose or like act in a sense. They just... believe in this to be the right thing to do and just the way of life.
And don't forget, the culture is very much surrounded with beauty, the Arabic poetry, the Arabic language, the architecture that they have. They're surrounded by beauty simply because they were kind of born into the plain canvas, which is the desert. And from that desert, they build the most incredible things. If you look at the architecture of the mosques today.
Yeah, that was one of the most beautiful... like buildings or structures that I ever
the Sheikh Zayed one in Abu Dhabi.
Take me to in Abu
Absolutely.
Dhabi.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. So you fell in love with Dubai. That's no wonder, of course. And you had the luck to be there when it was like just creating itself.
Absolutely.
From a desert. I saw the pictures like from 90s, how it progressed, and it's crazy that like I think no other city on the planet went.
There was no Palm Island, for example. I lived on the Palm where you came and you met me. I was on the Palm. And there was nothing. There was one highway and couple shopping centers, and couple towers on the Sheikh Zayed Road.
This is all the good part of it, but I'm sure there was some obstacles, some problems. So I would like you to tell me about something that was really hard, some challenge that you had to overcome and how you overcome it.
Hard was, I suppose, just, being independent so early and knowing that suddenly you have bills and suddenly you have to pay, for your flat.
Nobody's going to save you.
Absolutely, yes. You're by yourself in a way, young, in a different city. I was lucky I had a support group, so if worst case scenario, I could always crash on someone's couch, which I wouldn't want to do. But, there was obviously that safety net. But yes, paying your bills and, getting your car, being in charge of your own life. You don't have parents around. Your family is far away. You're in the city. You're supposed to be punctual. You're supposed to go to work. You're supposed to come back. You're supposed to run your life in a way that a 30-year-old runs the life.
Some of 30-year-olds cannot do that still.
Well, yeah, that's sad. But, So that was hard. And I suppose just kind of meeting people and parting with people as well, in a way, you know, in terms of relationships and culture difference back then, you know, it was those hard ones.
This group of girls that you speak, first like 15 girls that was doing all the modeling jobs in Dubai, it was mostly like Russians, Ukrainians, or it was all
There
over
was some Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Yugoslavians,
like
European and Eastern European, Bulgaria,
That's the most beautiful girls anyway.
They are, right? Yeah.
Well, I want to know about the moment where you really feel like you became successful. That must be some kind of era.
Yeah, so that was, I would say, I don't want to lie and like take a number out of nowhere, but I would say it was around 2007, 2006-07. Cartier, jewelry brand we all know and love, came to the Middle East. And they opened the first flagship store in Emirates Towers Boulevard, which was the destination back in the day to be. And they've done a fashion show to celebrate, you know, the launch and the opening. It was one of the most beautiful things that I was part of in my life. You know, it was outside. There was a massive, instead of a runway, there was a massive red carpet with audience sat on both sides of the carpet.
Lots of security, I imagine.
Absolutely. They brought all the models from Paris and they casted in Dubai locally as well. And I was the only person from Dubai that's done that. Only one.
Jeez.
And I was opening the show, which is a big deal. I had the most beautiful set of jewelry. And, you know, the clothes was just perfect. White dresses flowing in the wind. You know, imagine nighttime, all the lights. The red carpet, you're wearing millions and millions and millions worth of diamonds. And we're talking about special creations, you know, of the house.
Yeah.
So it's not the stuff that you can go to the store right now and buy. And it felt surreal. It felt crazy. So incredible. And right at that moment, I'm opening the show, my earring drops. Because there was a clip on, you know, it didn't go on the runway. Jeez. And what you do, you can't collect it. You know, you just have to kind of keep on walking like nothing ever happened.
Somebody's there to
Someone is there to obviously take it as security. And I've done that. And it just felt like, here I am. And, you know, I felt extremely proud of myself just then and there. You know, and I made it. For me, it was good enough, you know. And ever since, like, I worked with that brand for a long, long time. You know, I wore jewelry of Maharajas. So one-off necklaces with massive yellow diamonds.
It can be bought, actually.
It can be. It's a kind of exhibition piece right now. You know, it cannot be bought. It travels around the world.
It's a national heritage, probably, or something.
It travels around the world in exhibitions of Cartier high jewelry, you know, and I wore it. And I wore many other brands and many other pieces like that. So for me, you talk about my appreciation for beauty. It was embedded in me since a very early age.
Yeah.
And I love that. I appreciate it. I can clearly say, yes, I'm all up for that. You know.
That was the formative years, like late teenage years and early 20s. That's, of course, that's what's built in you and you cannot even hide it, even if you want. So I understand.
I don't want to.
I know you very well. So I know that. So after this moment of the Cartier and like on top of the world kind of a vibe, it was all easy after that?
Look, it was always sort of easy.
Oh, yeah.
And that's exactly, and that's, you know, that's the part of it, because I was always asked, why don't you go to Milan? Why don't you go to Paris? Why don't you go and try? And my reply was kind of, why should I? I was making extremely good money. I was comfortable. By that time, I got my own apartment and I got the car. And, you know, I had all the friendships, maybe a relationship as well, you know. So for me, trying to go to Paris and again start from zero and live in a model apartment and make, you know, fraction of what I was already making, that never made any sense.
Yeah.
So I was comfortable, and I'm not saying it was always very easy. At some points, of course, it was challenging. But overall, my modeling career for me was extremely natural and extremely easy. Just because, you know, it was the start. I was at the right place at the right time, and I was willing to put the hours and the sacrifice and, you know, time in. Because it wasn't even, you know, when you think about it back in the day, it wasn't even that professional as it is now. Now you have a makeup artist that comes with a kit and stuff. I had my eyelashes glued to my eyes with the super glue ones.
What?
You know, it was like, it was mad things happening. You know, just because they were learning at the same time as they were doing. So you would have absolutely wild kind of 10 shades of makeup on your face. And that was considered beautiful. You know, I've done a lot of like national clothes as well, campaigns and advertisement and shows, which is abaye, you know, nothing shows apart from your face. So stuff like that at the same time as doing, you know, international like brands and so and so. But, you know, I worked extremely hard to be where I was, you know, and I was always kind of in a way, I knew my own worth, which is funny I say that because where would that come from? But I kind of did, you know, I always had my prices higher than average. And I always said, look, I'm busy. If you want me, then that's it. This is my fee and that's how we're going to do it. If you don't, there's plenty of other models you can choose from. The kind of propositions would not come straight to your face. They would be sent through people. And I've had a lot of that. A lot of that, which I always rejected. And my reply always was, if a person is interested, let them come and talk to me.
Okay.
I'm not going to go on blind dates with nobody. I'm not going to be set up. I'm not interested. I don't care who he is. I don't care the job, the title. If somebody is interested in getting to know me, let them do it in person.
I think that's what saved you from being turned into something else.
Right.
What you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the modeling?
They're all prostitutes, you know.
Right.
Yeah, it's promiscuity.
But maybe because a lot of them are.
Don't be friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Because being friends with everybody ultimately gets you in the rubbish situations. Building yourself, get yourself a hobby. You know, don't go out until 5 a.m. Don't do drugs. It's like as simple as that. You know, it might feel complicated when there is a pressure from other people, but get rid of those people.
Maybe
you know, the woman is celebrated in the culture, which I absolutely love and adore.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's protecting her modesty and it's the boundaries.
Yeah.
In the way of clothes. You know, that's her boundaries and don't step over it. And I love that. So it's up to a woman.
Yeah.
And a lot think, oh, the man is forcing her. That's absolutely not the case. People, women, men as well, doesn't matter the gender, you know, cover themselves in brands head to toe and think it's fashion. It's not. Just because you wear Chanel head to toe doesn't make you a well-dressed person. I didn't come to that dinner thinking that, you know, we would be together.
Yeah, me neither. I came to the dinner hoping I will spend the night with you.
Of course, yeah.
As any man would, because he was wearing a beautiful dress and I was praying as I went to the toilet. I told you about, like, please, God, give me this woman. Like, she's so beautiful. I want to date her.
But give me for a night.
No. I was like, I'll become better. I will start dating. I want a relationship. Like, please, this is the one, I think.
Yeah, I remember packing those boxes and I had a company do it for me. 123 boxes and a car. And I was crying, and I remember I couldn't stop crying. I was so nervous. And I'm like, am I making the right decision? Because I told you, do you remember the conversations we had? I'm not moving nowhere without a ring. Look, a man is a provider. For me, it was always man is a provider. I'm not going to go and pay my electricity bills if I'm married. Why do I need you? You know, if I don't have a man, obviously I'll do it all by myself.
You did.
I am capable.
Yeah.
But why do I need to? If I'm married, I think the job of a man, and right now I think women are guilty as well, because we all fought for rights. I'm all up for like women and women's rights. I'm not against it in any way or form. But at the same time, let a man be a man. The woman's role is support. That's what we are. You know, we're the partners, we're the supporters, we're the advisors, because we feel people much better than you men do.
That's true.
You know, and we can look at things clearly and we can kind of give our own opinions and judgments. We can create that comfort for you. Look, if it wasn't for women, I truly believe men would just sleep on a mattress in the middle of the room and they would call it a house. I think most kind of issues we have right now is when men forget the gender roles. You know, that they try to force onto a woman or expect of a woman to do things that a man is supposed to do.
Like 50-50.
Yeah, that is a bullshit. I didn't even know I could be depressed because nobody told me. Everyone was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. You're going to have a baby. Yeah, amazing baby. But then I want to die. Like, how is that okay, you know? And so people don't talk about, and the very first few interviews that I had, I always made sure I would speak about it, you know. Aria's first year, I was always alone.
Yeah.
You were at work, you know, you were going to your studios from the
I was just meeting Grimo.
But you know what I mean? Like
you
were leaving in the afternoon, coming back late night. I was always alone. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to do. And that loneliness as well is what made it such a negative experience.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was born in Crimea, which was Ukrainian, but now is part of Russia. So, you know, his part of the family always spoke in Russian. You know, my mom and myself, I was born in Lugansk, which is also, you know, part of Russia now. So for us, it was all the same country. It was our neighbors. It was, you know, and suddenly they're bombing us. And, you know, I have like calls from my mom saying the buildings are on fire. And I see it like I was glued to the television. I couldn't comprehend it. I felt so helpless. I'm like, how do we help? But how do you help? Until today, I feel like it's surreal and it's not really happening. But there's so many broken lives. And now I try to explain it to Aria, you know, because like...
she has the blood. She has the Ukrainian blood from your side, yeah.
And, you know, she asked me, like, what is war? And she's like, our dad is being hurt.
Spirit Coffee je kvalitná organická káva z celého sveta, ktorá je pražená na Slovensku, takže je vždy čerstvá. Okrem biokvality je aj fair trade, čo znamená, že je pestovaná malými farmármi v krajinách, ktoré sú špičkou svetovej produkcie kávy. Zakúpením Spirit Coffee získate skvelú kávu, ale okrem toho môžete byť aj súčasťou dobrej veci. Rozhodol som sa, že celý môj profit z produktov Spirit Coffee venujem na charitu, ktorú vyberiete vy, fanúšikovia SPIRITSHOW, vo veľkom hlasovaní na konci roka 2025. Pridaj sa k nám aj ty a poďme spojiť príjemné s užitočným. Nakúpiť môžeš na spiritcoffee.sk zľava s kódom SPIRIT a nezabúdaj, že ráno robí deň a káva robí ráno. Spirit Coffee.